Caleb Williams, number one overall quarterback last year, goes to the Bears. He's supposed to be a generational talent. He's a guy that has very good arm talent. He can throw extremely well on the move. In college, he was tremendously elusive, very fast. We saw that kind of slow down a bit in the NFL, which it normally does, right? The athletes on defense in the NFL are absolutely insane. And so even if you're an elite athlete, unless you're just a total super freak, a Michael Vick, a Cam Newton, a Lamar Jackson, that level of guy, it's very, Josh Allen is very difficult generally as a quarterback to get away from defenders in the NFL, right? So anyway, we got Caleb Williams comes into the league, has a very,
I'm an artist.
very yeah, that OKC game is over. That's right. But yeah, he had a difficult season. Caleb Williams, probably the worst season of his life as a starting quarterback, which I guess most number one overall picks pretty much experience that, right? If you're watching here on YouTube, make sure you go ahead, click that subscribe, that like, that notification bell. Make sure you're kept up to date whenever we drop new content on the channel. If you want the audio only version of the podcast, open up your audio podcast platform, hit the search bar, type in The Format Podcast. We should come right up. If you're enjoying the content, make sure you give us a like, leave us a 5-star review, and drop a comment. All that stuff helps us rise in the algorithm, helps us find more sports fans, helps more sports fans find us. Make sure you write it down, put it in your phone, make a note of it. The Format Podcast is live Sunday mornings at 10 a.m. Eastern. And finally, if you're really and truly enjoying the content we're delivering you, make sure you hit that join button. There's going to be exclusive content here just for you. One overall draft pick in the NFL draft, not this past one, but the prior year, right, out of USC. And of course, he was outstanding at USC, won a Heisman, started off at Oklahoma with Lincoln Riley. And then when Lincoln Riley moved to USC 3 years ago, Caleb Williams followed him out to the West Coast. And Caleb Williams, in his first season at USC, won the Heisman Trophy, yet another Heisman Trophy winner, yet another number one overall quarterback that Lincoln Riley helped to raise up and tutor and help to have just an outstanding college career and theoretically start off their NFL career on the right foot by being the number one overall pick. I say theoretically because when you're the number one overall pick in the NFL draft, ordinarily you're going to a bad team. So that's not always the best situation, but you're getting the most money and you're having you're going to have the opportunity to be in a situation to maximize your earning potential right away. So there's that. But that said, Seth Wickersham, as I mentioned, worked with ESPN, has written a number of really good books. I think he wrote a book on Coach K, wrote a book on Belichick, Tiger Woods, that is. He has wrote a ton of really good books in the sports media space. And now he has written a book about NFL quarterbacks. And so he had some stuff in there on Caleb Williams that I thought was really interesting. So Caleb Williams, number one overall quarterback last year, goes to the Bears. He's supposed to be a generational talent. He's a guy that has very good arm talent. He can throw extremely well on the move. In college, he was tremendously elusive, very fast. We saw that kind of slow down a bit in the NFL, which it normally does, right? The athletes on defense in the NFL are absolutely insane. And so even if you're an elite athlete, unless you're just a total super freak, a Michael Vick, a Cam Newton, a Lamar Jackson, that level of guy, it's very, Josh Allen is very difficult generally as a quarterback to get away from defenders in the NFL, right? So anyway, we got Caleb Williams comes into the league, has a very, yeah, that OKC game is over, Transformer. That's right. But yeah, he had a difficult season. Caleb Williams, probably the worst season of his life as a starting quarterback, which I guess most number one overall picks pretty much experience that, right? Because most of them have been so much more physically gifted and skilled than their opposition that, since they started playing the game, they've had a tremendous amount of success. So last year, Caleb Williams was 5-12. That was his record as a starter. Completes 62.5% of his passes for 3,541 yards, 20 touchdowns, and only 6 interceptions. Now, that's not bad because most of the time what you see is rookie quarterbacks coming into the league and throwing a ton of interceptions because the game is so fast, right? Whether it's the pressure, whether it's the defensive backs, whether it's the holes that would have been wide open in college closing up so much more quickly in the NFL, all that stuff is stuff that happens, and it takes time for these NFL quarterbacks to really get used to that and try to figure out how to deal with it and to have success, right? And so Caleb, while not terrible statistically, just didn't have a good year. Now, a big part of that was lack of good coaching, lack of protection. I believe he was sacked 68 times, which was tops in the league. And you're getting hit by NFL defenders that many times, man. It is very, very tough. And, there's not a whole lot you can do about it. Like, if we remember, David Carr, Derek Carr's older brother, he was the number 1 overall pick, and he was in Houston. And he got absolutely demolished. They literally, beat the talent out of that guy in his first few years. He got sacked so many times. He was never able to overcome that, right? And so that's just kind of one of those things. But yeah, Caleb had a decent season. At times he showed promise, but he definitely wasn't he didn't appear to be, the quote unquote generational talent that everyone had touted him as coming out of USC. But now we're hearing a lot of interesting things from Wickersham. You can read about it. You can also listen to different things about it. So I have some clips here, as I like to do, from the Rich Eisen show, where he actually had Seth Wickersham on, and he was talking about, so we have 2 clips here. One is about 3.5 minutes. The other is about a minute, not a minute and a half, about 2.5 minutes. So we'll listen to those and we'll talk about it. Yeah, Transformer, you're absolutely right. Chicago has never, they always like to say, sports media guys always like to say the last great Chicago quarterback was Sid Luckman. For whatever reason, the Chicago Bears have great difficulty developing quarterbacks. I don't know what it is, but as an organization, they don't do it well, right? When they got Jay Cutler, they had a chance to go to Super Bowl. I think he got injured in the NFC title game. But he had already been developed somewhere else, right? He came over from Denver. So the thought is probably that if he had gone straight to the Bears, he would never have become what he ended up becoming. So there's that. But yeah, man, Chicago has had consistent difficulty developing quarterbacks, and I don't know what that is. Bears and Browns, what is Wood saying? Bears and Browns are the killer bees for quarterbacks. So Baker was pretty solid. I think in his second year as the Browns quarterback, he took them to the playoffs and won their first playoff game in like 20 or 25 years, if I'm not mistaken. And I think he threw 5 touchdowns in that game and smoked the Steelers. Smoked the Steelers. So, I mean, I hear what you're saying. On the whole, yeah, the Browns haven't had a great amount of success with quarterbacks either. But yeah, the Bears and the Browns. Yeah, you're probably right, Woodage. Yeah, Baker was good, but they gave up on him for Watson. Absolutely. I don't know why they did that. I'm sure that looking back now, they wish that they didn't, but you make the decisions you got to make and you got to live with them. But yeah, let's go ahead and start listening to some of the commentary from Rich Eisen and Seth Wickersham regarding Caleb and his dad not wanting him to go to the Bears. And this is interesting. And then we'll talk about how the organization to some extent failed Caleb Williams. Yeah, so let's start that off. And you know how I do. I play the clip, I stop, I interject, and then I go back to it. That way, I can have the opportunity to respond in real time to different things that were said. All right, let's check it out.
How close did it come to Caleb Williams truly trying to force his way not to be drafted by the Chicago Bears?
I don't think it was that close, but it was one of those things that was definitely pondered. And, it had been out in the ether in the months leading up to the draft. And what I tried to do was just add some clarity and some detail to it where I could. Look, I think that Carl has been very clear publicly about his opinions of the NFL draft process and the fact that the worst team drafts the best player.
Okay, so Carl Williams, Caleb Williams' dad, very involved father. So good stuff there. But yeah, he does not like the process that the worst team drafts the best player. But look, that's kind of how sports goes. That's generally how it goes, unless, your basketball is a draft lottery. But the worst team generally, especially in football, the worst team is going to draft the best player because they need the opportunity in terms of parity to try and get better. And also in football, you can do it that way because one player generally is not good enough generally to be that much of a difference maker in a sport that has, 11 guys on offense, 11 guys on defense. One player, if that player is really good, can make a big difference, but it's not going to be like LeBron or Tim Duncan or Larry Bird or something like, 30 game turnaround in one season, that kind of thing. So yeah, what's going on, Steve? Yeah. So that's kind of, that's where it starts off when he mentioned Carl. And that's, again, Carl Williams, Caleb's dad, and his dislike of the system in the NFL where the best player, number one overall pick, goes to the worst team.
And he was looking for ways around it because he saw a system where his son was locked into the team that drafted him, like all number one picks are, for basically 8 years. And so he was trying to find a way around it. And
so when he says his son locked into the team that drafted him for basically 8 years, so generally what you have there is you have the 5 years on the rookie deal, right? If the player plays out the entire rookie deal without a new contract, the team can have him for 5 years. I think the 5th year is generally a team option. And then theoretically, the team then can, I think, franchise for 2 years after that. And there's another designation that they can put on the player. It's not a third franchise, but it's something else. So theoretically, they could have that player for 8 years without giving them a new extension. And so Caleb's dad definitely did not like that, especially if his son was not in a position and on a team that he felt was the best position for him. He didn't like the fact that a team could have him locked in that long.
Met with people like Marvin Demoff and Archie Manning and lawyers and people like that, all trying to find loopholes around the draft. And at one point, they even considered joining the United Football League if it would give him a chance to be an unrestricted free agent in 2025.
So that was interesting when he talked about the possibility of his son going to the UFL. Now, I don't know if that would have been after he was drafted or before, right? Because I'm not sure. I should have looked this up, but I'm not sure if there's a situation where you have a certain amount of time prior to the draft where you can withdraw from the draft, but not go back to school. I don't know. Because I guess he's thinking go to the UFL, play for 1 year, and then come back to the NFL, you'd be an unrestricted free agent. But as we know, obviously, if you get drafted by a team now, they hold your rights. So you can play wherever you want for as long as you want, but they hold your rights until you come back to the NFL, and then you have to figure that out. So, yeah, Steve, that is that's how most of us look at it. Manning's, Williams, Sanders, this idea of trying to manipulate where one goes is baffling to me. Being drafted by anyone is a blessing. True. That's how we look at it because none of us are in that situation. But at the same time, this thing is still a business, right? And the teams can look at it like a business. Now, I'm not necessarily a proponent of what these guys are doing either. But if the teams can look at it like a business, then the players should look at it like a business as well, because they only have a small amount of time to maximize their earnings. One, with the physicality of the game, even though they've tried to tamper that down, is still an extremely physical game with very large, very fast men flying all over the place, colliding into one another. The average NFL career, I believe, is 3.5 seasons, right? So you don't have that long to make the max amount of money, especially for the time and the effort that you have put into getting to this level. So I get what you're saying, Steve, but also, we have to look at this thing from both sides. Although I will agree with you, my issue is the system is what it is, right? Is it right? I'm not sure. Is it wrong? I'm not sure. But the system is what it is. And realistically, you haven't done not you being you, of course, but if you're being drafted, you haven't done anything on that level yet for you to be trying to dictate terms. To me, to be able to dictate terms, you have to go prove something first. That's just my thought, but I'm sure there's way more to it. Let's see. Woody says, Jim Kelly tried to do that with the Bills in 83, ended up joining them in 86. It worked out for him in the end. Yes, it did. I believe Jim Kelly went and played in the USFL for a few years, if I'm correct, right? Woodich, I believe he did. And then he ends up coming back and he's still with the Bills. He went to 4 Super Bowls. Obviously, he's a Hall of Famer, never won a Super Bowl, but it is what it is. Well, so Woody says college, the teams are stacked with great rosters, NFL, not so much. What it is that the talent is spread out across the league more evenly in the NFL. You're not in a situation where it's going to be so easy like in college where, you can be Notre Dame playing Bruce Hope State and run it up on them, 66 zip, right? That's not going to make it. But in the pros where the talent is spread out evenly, because less than 0.5% of all high school football players end up ever making it to the NFL, right? I think I looked it up the other day and it's like, I think it's less than 0.3% of all high school football players ever make it to the NFL. So, to be there, even though we look at some guys in the league, we're like, man, this dude's sorry. Those guys are the best of the best of the best, right? So we got to look at it that way. All right, but let's get back to Seth Wickersham and Rich Eisen.
Ultimately, none of those really were things that he wanted to do. At the Combine, Caleb obviously met with the Bears. He also met with Kevin O'Connell of the Vikings, and they hit it off. And I have a lot of stuff in the book from Kevin about how he coaches quarterbacks and how it's rooted in his autobiography.
Now, that's really interesting that he said he really hit it off with Kevin O'Connell at the Combine. Now, I think by now we should be convinced that Kevin O'Connell is a really good quarterbacks coach. And if we're not, we only need to look at last season where he coached Sam Darnold, who's a guy I still don't believe is very good, but he coached him to his clearly best pro season. Now, of course, he had elite weapons to throw to, but still he coached him to his best pro season. So clearly Kevin O'Connell knows a little something about what he's doing. He's also a former quarterback who played in the league, right? So he knows how to scheme stuff up. He knows how to talk quarterback. He knows how to talk to these guys, connect with these guys, much more so than, say, Matt Eberflus, who's a former defensive coordinator. And we're going to hear some stuff about that later.
And they just really took to each other. And at one point, Caleb said, I got to go to the Bears. And his dad was like, let's try it. But
real quick, he just said at one point, Caleb said, I got to go to the Bears. What Wickersham meant to say there, he said, Caleb told his dad, I got to go to the Vikings. That's been widely reported that he wanted to go to the Vikings. But obviously the Bears had the number one overall pick, and they were not going to trade it to a division rival, to give them a shot at a guy who was regarded as a generational level quarterback.
Like, they both knew that getting traded to a divisional rival was almost a non-starter. Around the time of Caleb's pro day, Ryan Poles, the GM of the Bears, said, we're drafting you no matter what. Remember, they didn't even look at quarterbacks like Jaden Daniels. They were all in on Caleb. And so that left one option, the Jack and John Elway option of basically nuking a city and making a situation untenable. And while I think Carl would have been willing to do it and was willing to take bullets for his son, it wasn't something that Caleb wanted to do. And as he told me when we discussed it, he said, I wasn't ready to nuke Chicago.
And that all makes sense. Everything.
It makes a lot of sense.
From a dad wanting to do well by his son to loving Kevin O'Connell. I mean, anybody who talks football and offense and quarterbacking with him gets it right away. And obviously Caleb got it, and all the way through to having a sense of the setup for him on the coaching side wasn't really to his liking, or there could be something up. So in the limited time I have with you here, Seth, what did happen? Any reporting at all on the Bears' choice to stick with Eberflus, or that's not part of your book?
So that part was crazy to me. And again, we'll hear more about that. But Matt Eberflus being a defensive guy, a guy who hadn't been very good for the most part with the Bears, a guy who I believe had already fired a coordinator. It's like, why would you stick with him? You're getting the number one overall pick, again, a supposedly generational talent at the quarterback position. Eberflus hasn't shown you any indication that he can help quarterbacks develop, right? Because he had Justin Fields, who many people look at Justin Fields now and say, oh, he's a bum, whatever. But Justin Fields is an elite physical talent, both running and throwing. If we go back to Ohio State, Justin Fields was just as accurate, if not more so, down the field and on tight window throws than Trevor Lawrence was. He was really good, schooled in a pro-style offense, because if we remember, Ryan Day was a pro coach before, going back to Ohio State. So he's familiar with the pro-style game and all of that. So Justin Fields had everything, but Eberflus couldn't coach him, didn't have him have the proper development, didn't have the proper connection with his quarterback. And so there was no indication that he could do that. So you bring in Caleb and you keep him. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense
at all. Did the Bears did the Williams family have any insight on why Cliff Kingsbury wasn't hired there and they stuck with Eberflus and Waldron was the guy? Anything from that end?
So when they mentioned Waldron was the guy, that's Shane Waldron, who was the former offensive coordinator for the Seattle Seahawks, and I believe he got fired from the Seahawks, and then the Bears hired him and brought him in to be the OC with Caleb Williams. I don't know why. So they also mentioned, you heard Rich Eisen bring up Cliff Kingsbury there, and that would have been a pretty good fit. Why? Because Cliff Kingsbury was Caleb Williams' offensive coordinator during his Heisman Trophy season at USC. So he already knew him, and he had the connection with him. Caleb knew his scheme and his system. So you could have, if you're the Bears, you could have fired Eberflus and hired Cliff Kingsbury as the head coach, or you could have at the least hired him as the OC to work with your quarterback who you believe is going to be that guy.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of good coaches could have been hired, and I think that Caleb was wondering out loud whether he could do it with Shane Waldron. And I think that when Shane was brought in, I think that the Williams camp was kind of underwhelmed by that choice. Obviously, it didn't go well. Shane didn't last the year. Neither did Eberflus. And look, the Bears haven't had a great history when it comes to quarterbacks. We know that. They haven't drafted a star since Jim McMahon. That was in the 80s. And even recent guys like Justin Fields and Mitch Trubisky hadn't panned out. And so when you look at the organizational stability, the offensive expertise and performance that was under Matt Eberflus, and just some other issues like, the stadium uncertainty, that type of thing. This is what led them to wonder out loud about that. And again, in the months leading up to the draft, Carl Williams told me Chicago is where quarterbacks go to die.
So, excuse me. So that is interesting. Chicago is where quarterbacks go to die. And in fairness, I don't think there's too much to indicate that Caleb's dad wasn't correct about that. But we're going to see now, because they've got Ben Johnson as the head coach. He's been the hot coaching candidate for the last two hiring cycles in the NFL. Obviously, the former offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. And but in fairness, it's like, okay, the Lions had two good running backs. They had one of the best offensive lines in football. They had a very solid quarterback. They have weapons on the outside. Like, they had everything. So we'll see now if he's that good an OC, or if he just took advantage of a position he was in, him being Ben Johnson, and now he's getting to coach Caleb Williams. So we'll see how much this helps Caleb Williams, and we'll see if this is real. What's up, Bruce? Bruce says, Caleb is a damn diva with them damn fingernails, man. Look, man, it's 2025. These young cats, man, they different. I don't know. That's not different in a good way. But anyway, we'll see. We'll see if he can do his thing. Let's see. No, so you're right, Steve. Steve, we know that you're biased against Ohio State, so we'll take your comments with a grain of salt. But no, the Urban Meyer system is not a good transition for quarterbacks to the league. Absolutely. But no, Ryan Day, his system shouldn't be difficult for quarterbacks to go to the league, because remember, he was a pro coach. He was a pro coach, so he knows, what it is. He has pro concepts in his scheme. So I'm not too worried about that. But we'll see. I think a big part of it is that a lot of the Ohio State quarterbacks are so used to having, arguably the best, if not the best, wide receiver room in the country. And so when you have all those type of freaks on the outside that you're throwing to on a regular basis, you're turning around, you're handing off to, all-American 5-star type running backs. It's real easy for you. So you may not ever learn how to overcome difficulty. You may not ever learn how to make the anticipatory throws, because your receivers are so good, they're always beating coverage. So there's that. But yeah, this Caleb Williams thing, very interesting. And I can't wait to read Seth Wickersham's book. Now, the Caleb Williams part is just a part of it. He's talking about American quarterbacks in general, but that's a part of it. And I think it's very interesting. So now let's go to the next clip. And this one is about a minute shorter, 2.5 minutes, where they're kind of going to talk about how they feel like the Bears and Matt Eberflus failed Caleb Williams and didn't help him to have success as a rookie. So there may be some truth to that, but I also have some questions there.
Everyone's kind of jumping at what you learned about what the Bears were doing with Caleb last year. Did he and did he really say that they didn't give him any sense on how to watch film and he watched it by himself? Seth?
Yeah, it was one of those things that when I discussed it with Caleb, we brought up Alex Smith, because Alex Smith, has talked a lot about that in San Francisco, how he would just watch film by himself and no one had taught him how to watch film, how you start with certain positions and move backwards from there. And there were similarities with Caleb. And at times he would just watch film by himself with little direction.
So that's interesting to me, right? And the reason that part is interesting to me is that Caleb just telling the truth? I'm sure he's not lying, but is there also a lack of accountability on Caleb's part there? And why am I asking that? I'm asking that because, as I mentioned before, Caleb played for Lincoln Riley. Lincoln Riley got Jalen Hurts as a Heisman runner-up. He got him drafted in the second round. He got Kyler Murray as a Heisman Trophy winner. He got him drafted number 1 overall. He had Baker Mayfield, Heisman Trophy winner, 3-time Heisman Trophy finalist, and he got him drafted number 1 overall, right? So Jalen Hurts, Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Caleb Williams. All three of those other guys somehow learned how to watch film, and they all played for Lincoln Riley. How is Caleb Williams the only one who played for Lincoln Riley but doesn't know how to watch film? Now, am I saying that the situation that those other guys fell into and the coaches they had didn't help them to learn how to watch film? No, I'm not saying that. Am I saying that they didn't guide those guys? No, I'm not saying that. Am I saying that Eberflus and the Chicago Bears organization gave Caleb all the support and the help and the training that he needed? No, I'm not saying that either. But I do find it interesting that Caleb would say, he didn't know how to watch film, and they just had him watching it by himself, and nobody helped him, nobody taught him. And I'm like, well, how did Baker, Kyler, and Jalen Hurts all know how to watch film coming out of Oklahoma, but Caleb Williams didn't know how to watch film coming out of USC with the same head coach? That would be my question. But let's go ahead from here.
And, I want to make one thing clear is that, like, ultimately all of this stuff was Caleb's decision. And he did visit the Bears after his pro day, and he came back and he told, everybody around him that, like, I can do it in Chicago. I'm going to be a Bear. And I think that, his heart is in it, trying to figure out a way to turn the Bears into a winner. Just some of my reporting touches on some of the concerns that happened ahead of time. But, look, as the season went on, I mean, it was a huge validation for the way that Carl Williams saw this process unfolding. Not that I think he's happy about that, but, those were his fears. And he wanted his son to end up at a team that had, the type of quarterback guru that, can be a partnership that lasts the duration of a career. And, already Caleb is going to be on, his third, offensive play caller and second head coach entering his second year.
But I think, the general sense is that he does appear to be in a position of having that attached at the hip career play caller and career maker in Ben Johnson. At least that is the sense that everyone has, certainly in hope in Chicago, that he is going to be that guy. Mm-hmm. That said, I still can't believe that a kid was let to watch film by himself, or not really given too many, parameters on how to be a film watcher or what to look for. That he said he would turn the film on by himself to figure out what to watch, Seth.
So here's the other question. If you're Caleb, all right, cool. Nobody's teaching you how to watch film. There's nobody else in the league you can reach out to for some help on that, some tips. No other veteran quarterbacks maybe that you're cool with. There's no other coach from somewhere that you can go to. There's no quarterback coach. There's got to be a quarterback coach, right? There's no OC that you can say, hey, can you help me with this? Like that right there, again, lack of accountability. That's kind of disturbing to me that, Caleb would say, oh, well, they just put me in the room by myself to watch film. Okay, you want to be the best that you can be. We know you got the physical tools, but cool. You're not going to say, hey, coach, to your OC. Hey, coach, to your quarterback's coach, can you sit in here with me and kind of help me figure out some of what I'm looking at? I have some questions here that I want to go over with you, blah, 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 right? What's the deal there? Or again, are you just wanting to blame your, I'm not going to say your failure, but your less than exemplary rookie season on the circumstance? Like, again, it's one of those things where, yes, the Bears have plenty of blame, but there's also plenty of blame to go around, in my estimation.
Yeah. And, again, this has happened before. Quarterbacks do talk about it. It's one of those things about the NFL that we can't really believe that takes place, but it does. And it's one of the reasons why people like Carl Williams were so concerned about where his son ended up and wanted to do everything that they could to try to give him an opportunity to have some agency over where he ended up. Obviously, that didn't end up happening, but that's why. And, people can argue with the tactics or whatever it might be, but it's hard to argue with the logic behind it, especially when you see a season play out like it did last year. I mean, he was sacked 68 times. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, 68 times. That's getting the stuff and beat out of you. So I will say this, though. The Bears clearly have made a concerted effort to try and shore up that offensive line this season. So we'll see what they do and how they're able to assist him. And we'll just wait and see. And of course, again, they have made the coaching change. Now they got, boy genius Ben Johnson, and we'll see what he can do without everything that the Detroit Lions had in place. So again, I thought this was really interesting. I would suggest that if this is something you want to know more about, there's plenty of articles out there about it. I think there's an article on ESPN.com, or you can just go on YouTube and go find the Rich Eisen video interview with Seth Wickersham where he talks about it. I'm sure Colin Cowherd talked about it a ton. So there's a lot of information and a lot of takes and stuff out there about it. But I just thought it was interesting, and that was something I wanted to share with you. And I am somewhat excited to see what Caleb and what the Bears are going to be able to get done this season, because they've made a lot of changes. And I think that Ryan Poles' job, maybe Kevin Warren, but definitely Ryan Poles' job is probably on the line here this year if they can't see some level of market improvement, which is tough because the NFC North is a very tough division. So we're going to see what happens, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing that. Steve, you make a great point. He will not be objective with a USC quarterback. That is correct. But he won't be objective with a USC quarterback, and he also hates to see defensive head coaches, which is crazy because some of them are actually good. We saw Washington make it to the NFC title game with a rookie quarterback and a defensive head coach. So, but anyway, yeah, you're absolutely right, Steve. But yeah, so those are my thoughts on this Bears quarterback situation and Seth Wickersham and the reporting that he did and what he wrote in his book regarding Caleb Williams and the QB situation prior to the draft and during his rookie year, et cetera. So I wanted to share that stuff with you and talk a little bit about it. But I'm going to go ahead now, open up the phone lines. I will take 2 quick calls, and then we will get right on to the next topic. All right. You know the number, 904-219-8264, 904-219-8264. All right. Yeah, this one was definitely interesting. When I was listening to all this stuff, I was like, man, this is kind of crazy. This is kind of crazy. And I'm not a guy that's at all a proponent of people trying to manipulate where they go before they've done anything in the league. Before you're making moves like that, and before you want to have power, you have to have proven something on that level, to me. But I guess if you feel that you have the leverage to kind of get away with something like that, then you go for it. But I'm not for it. But hey, if you can get away with it and it's legal and it's not immoral, hey, do what you do. All right, I'm gonna wait about another 30 seconds here, and if we don't get a call, we will take it to the next topic.